What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul Brettel. I'm the site editor over at Dairyland Express, where we cover the Packers, Brewers, Bucks, and Badgers. I also have a new article out every Monday and Friday over at Cheesehead TV. And as it says at the bottom of the screen here, you can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. So for today's episode, I'm going to discuss an article over at Dairyland Express that I posted on Wednesday in regards to Yosh Nijman and his future with the Green Bay Packers. What role, what capacity will that be? And then at the end, we'll just quickly run through all of the transactions, roster moves that the Green Bay Packers made on Wednesday, because there were a lot of them. But first, Yosh and his future. So coming into this season, Yosh was, he was a great mystery to us. We knew he had the height, the size, 6'7", 320-ish pounds, the athleticism. I mean, Billy Turner's even talked about it this season, and I know others have as well, how he is one of, pound for pound, either the best or one of the best athletes on this team. We knew all about that. He had all the tangibles that you want in an offensive tackle that general managers covet when they're looking at that position. But he was very raw coming out of Virginia Tech, signed as undrafted rookie in 2019. And again, we didn't know where he was at in his development. I'm pretty sure I talked about that over the summer. But due to injuries, unfortunately, we've been able to see Yosh out there, and he definitely looks like someone who is a capable starter in the NFL. According to Pro Football Focus, he's allowed just 3 sacks, 16 pressures during his time on the field. I will say, LaFleur, Aaron Rodgers, he's a part of the game plan. He has to be accounted for. There's been a lot of quick passes. There's been tight end chips. Other aspects of the game plan that can help Yosh, and not just Yosh, but the entire offensive line. But at the end of the day, it's Yosh going up against TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa, Trey Hendrickson, Robert Quinn. He's the one going up against those players, and he's held his own very well, all things considered. So now we look ahead to 2022. What does the future hold for Yosh here in Green Bay? So first, we need to start with, he's an exclusive rights free agent, which means that he has less than 3 years of accrued NFL experience. So the first 2 years, or 2019, did not count towards his, accrued years because he was on the practice squad. So as an exclusive rights free agent, the term free agent's in there, but they're really not. If the Green Bay Packers offer Yosh a league minimum deal, he cannot negotiate with other teams. The only way he could negotiate is if the Packers said, we don't want you here anymore. And they don't make him an offer, which I just can't imagine is going to be the case. So even for the Green Bay Packers, who are going to be very, very tight up against the salary cap, which we'll get to here in a second, Yosh is going to be back next year. He can be back on a league minimum deal. Why wouldn't you? So how do they use him next year? David Bakhtiari is going to be back. He is the left tackle. There is zero debate about that. So does Yosh go back to the bench and utilized when needed, if injuries pop up or whatever the issue may be? Or does he become Green Bay's right tackle of the future? This is a position that I've had my eyes on, who's going to be the right tackle of the future, for at least a year now, with my eyes on Billy Turner's contract and what his future holds as well. Because I didn't necessarily know at the time, if we rewind 6 months, if that player was on the roster. Again, we didn't know who Yosh was. Players like Cole Van Lannon, Royce Newman, they seem better fit for the interior, even though they were tackles in college. But Yosh potentially could take over that role moving forward. And I will say, Billy Turner, he has been rock solid at the right tackle position for 2 seasons now. Rodgers, when he was on the Pat McAfee show, discussed how he absolutely should have been a Pro Bowler. And amidst all the movement along the offensive line and the injuries this season, Billy Turner's been there to provide some much-needed stability at the right tackle position. And by ESPN's pass block win rate metric, which measures how often a player can hold their block for at least 2.5 seconds, he ranks 6th among all offensive tackles in football this season. But 2022 is the final year of his deal. As I just previously mentioned, and as you all know, Green Bay is very tight up against the salary cap. Over the cap currently has him at $40.4 million over the projected 2022 salary cap. And that's the low end, because that figure does not include any free agent signings that they make. It does not include the incoming draft class. It does not include the practice squad. And it does not include having money left over for in-season spending. So you can sign Whitney Merciless, Rasul Douglas, Jalen Smith. So you can make those in-season additions over the course of the year. So that $40.4 million is definitely on the light side. So Green Bay is going to have to do a lot more work than that just to be able to function next season from a cap situation. So with that, there's going to be a lot of difficult financial moves, decisions that have to be made. And I imagine Billy Turner falls into that group. Turner's cap hit next year is $8.8 million. His dead cap hit is $5.8 million. The dead cap hit is money that is already been paid out to the player. And regardless of whether they're on the team or not, that money is going to be on the books next year. So his cap hit of 8.8, his dead cap hit's 5.8. So if the Green Bay Packers move on from him, they actually save roughly $3 million in cap space. Now, this opens up the argument. Billy Turner has proven that he is a very reliable right tackle. Is $3 million in savings worth it to move on from a player of his caliber and the stability that he's provided and just what he means to this Green Bay Packers team? And we all know he's very close with Aaron Rodgers as well. Rodgers speaks highly of him all the time. So that definitely is up for debate. But when you're a team like the Green Bay Packers, who are going to be as cash or cap strapped, I should say, as they're going to be next season, every little bit helps. And that $3 million could absolutely help. So that's the decision that they're going to have to make is, do they view Yosh as a potential right tackle of the future? And I will say, even though they're both offensive tackles, moving from left tackle to right tackle or vice versa, that's definitely a transition. That's not something you just do. So that has to be a factor in this as well. But given Green Bay's cap situation, and Yosh is still a young player, he's still a developing player. And as we talked about at the beginning, he's a super athlete. So given those points, I think that this is definitely going to be a part of the conversation. And that's a move that Green Bay would be willing to try to make with him, even though there may be a bit of a transition period involved with that. It's a little bit different because Brian Bulaga, Corey Linsley, their contracts were up. Billy Turner still has a year left. But in recent years, we've seen Green Bay move on from core pieces of the offensive line for younger, more contract-friendly players in that regard. So perhaps they do it again in 2022. Or maybe Yosh is just back, like I said, in that backup role. Either way, it's going to be interesting. And this is just one of the many interesting decisions that Green Bay is going to have to make this coming off season. Now we'll transition to the roster moves that were made on Wednesday. And as I said, there were a lot of them. More Green Bay Packers hit the reserve COVID list, but Jaire Alexander was activated from IR and he is on the 53-man roster. This obviously a good sign, good news for the Green Bay Packers, who hope to get their all-pro cornerback back at some point this season. But it's worth noting, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but just because he's back on the roster does not mean he's suiting up on Sunday to face the Minnesota Vikings. This move was purely because it was a deadline. When he returned to practice 3 weeks ago, that opened a 3-week window to activate him. Had Green Bay not activated him from IR, he would have stayed on IR, but he would have went to season-ending IR. At that point, there would have been no opportunity for them to bring him back. So just like David Bakhtiari, he came off the PUP list because there was a deadline. And he's been on the 53-man roster, but as we've seen, he is not suited up. So just because Jaire is back does not mean he's playing against Minnesota. And for what it's worth, at Wednesday's practice, he was listed as a limited participant. And I assume it's the same philosophy, but Matt LaFleur, when David Bakhtiari first came back, said he's going to want to see Bakhtiari string together multiple full participant practices in a row. So I imagine it's going to be similar for Jaire. So as the week unfolds and as we go into next week and the coming weeks, definitely something to keep our eyes on. What's his participation in practice like? And hopefully when that point comes, when Jaire comes back, Green Bay is going to have some decisions to make in that secondary because Rasul Douglas, Eric Stokes, they're both playing very well. And how do you fit those three on the field at the same time? Or do you? Green Bay could choose to go with Jaire Alexander and Eric Stokes on the boundary, keep Sullivan in the slot. Could go Rasul and Jaire on the boundary, Sullivan in the slot. Perhaps it's Douglas and Stokes on the boundary. Jaire goes into the slot. I also saw Andy Herman of Packer Report, Pack-A-Day Podcast. He brought up an idea where Jaire and Stokes stay on the boundary, Sullivan stays in the slot, and Rasul Douglas takes over that Henry Black role as kind of that third safety in those passing situations, just because he's been so effective. So that's one way. Another way to get all three of those guys on the field together. It's going to be interesting, and as is often the case with a Matt LaFleur coach team, I don't think there's going to be one single solution. It's going to be very, very matchup dependent. If Green Bay is playing a team like the Minnesota Vikings, we might see Jair Alexander on the boundary quite a bit with a player like Justin Jefferson. If they're up against a team like the LA Rams with Cooper Kupp, who takes a lot of his snaps from the slot, we're probably going to see Jair Alexander from the slot quite a bit. So it's going to be fluid. It's going to be week to week. Might even be half to half within a game, just depending on the matchups and how the game's going. But it's a good problem to have ultimately when you have too many good players to choose from and how to try to fit them all in the field. Now to the COVID reserve list, Green Bay placed 4 more players there on Wednesday: Henry Black, Kingsley Keke, Tyler Davis, and Corey Bojorquez. So Green Bay is becoming very thin at both the tight end and interior defensive line position. As in addition to Tyler Davis being on the COVID list, Mercedes Lewis was placed there earlier in the week. Dominic Daphne, he was a limited participant in practice on Wednesday as well. And then the interior defensive line, Keke is on the COVID list. Tyler Lancaster, he did not participate in practice. He did not participate in practice on Wednesday. And they're going up against Minnesota, another run-heavy team. Green Bay Packers run defense has struggled as of late, as we all know. I'll dive into this more in my preview episode that I'll have coming out here on Saturday. But Dalvin Cook, Minnesota Vikings, a very chilly Lambeau Field. What I'll say right now is Joe Barry has to do something different. Trotting out the same base defense, protecting against the pass, obviously has not worked in recent weeks. So he's going to have to switch it up. And I know that comes with its risk. It's pick your poison. Try to slow Dalvin Cook, try to slow Justin Jefferson. But this Green Bay Packers run defense, they're getting all run over right now, and something needs to change. Also, wrote an article about this, but Corey Bojorquez on the COVID list. Obviously, we just went over Packers are thin at some positions, but they have other guys on the roster to fill that role. They do not have another punter. Now, what we learned from Yosh Nijman of The Athletic is that Bojorquez was placed on the reserve COVID list on Tuesday, which means under the new NFL health and safety protocols, he can potentially come back for Sunday's game as long as he's asymptomatic. So there's a potential that he'll still be out there Sunday. But if he's not, well, Green Bay's going to need a new punter. Who that is, I have no idea. Ryan Winslow, who was here during training camp, the Cardinals just cut him off the practice squad. J.K. Scott's still out there as a free agent. So there's some familiar faces. Earlier in the season, Maurice Drayton also mentioned that they have an emergency punter on the roster just in case. Who that is, again, just speculation. Who knows at this point? Maybe it's Kurt Benkert. He's put out some videos of him being able to knock some punts around on the football field. But we'll just have to keep our eyes on that. And as up and down, or I guess ugly, we should say, as the special teams unit has been this season, Corey Bojorquez has definitely been one of the bright spots. So hopefully he'll be healthy and good to go for Sunday. Lastly, Green Bay signed 4 new players to the practice squad. Aaron Adeyo, an edge rusher. He's already been on the practice squad this season. Adrian Ely, an offensive tackle. Jason Stanley, a cornerback. And Kareth White, a running back. Again, someone who's already been on the practice squad this season. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know these players that well. I do not. Every time Green Bay makes an addition over on my Twitter account, Paul_Brettel, I post just some stats, numbers, facts about their football careers, just to try to provide some insight into the player. So head over there to check that out to gain a little insight on these guys. But these are all depth moves, and chances are there's going to be more. I can't remember the exact number, but I think Green Bay's active roster right now is at like 42 or 46 players. It's somewhere in that range. So they're definitely going to have to make some additional moves, whether it's practice squad elevations, signings, anything like that. They're going to have to make some additions. Oh, lastly, almost forgot. Marquez Valdez-Scantling has been activated off the reserve COVID list. Obviously great to have him back. We talked about him last week, not just his big playability that he brings, but the tension that he draws, his ability to play in the slot. He's been incredibly effective there. The intermediate routes, his game has definitely branched out and become more than just a big play threat. Well, there you have it. That was a laundry list of items, and like I said, there's probably going to be more moves made just to try to help fill out the roster for Sunday's game. But as always, I thank you for joining me. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Please like the video. Please subscribe. I do greatly appreciate it. You can find my work at Dairyland Express and Cheesehead TV. And until next time, friends, take care, stay safe, and as always, go Pack Go.